Well, hi, it's Diane from Diane's Corner, and I wanted to share about Phil Kessel's story. That would be Tom's dad. And actually, he was born in Odessa, Russia, and the family were Germans who had immigrated over to Russia. So they describe themselves as Germans from Russia. And I'm using Echoing Trails 1 and 2 to describe, because he did such a beautiful job, actually. Phil Kessel, he writes himself, I was born May 24th, 1894 in Russia. I was 5 when we left Russia for America. I remember the band playing when we left our home, and the people who gathered to wish us well on our adventure. I don't remember much on the boat. We all stayed in our family groups. A lot of people got seasick. The ocean was rough since our trip took place in November. A sailor gave me a banana to eat. It was the first one I ever saw. I didn't eat it because I thought it was poisonous. We went through customs at New York City and then traveled to Dickinson, North Dakota by train with the Joseph Obagewicz family. Mrs. Obagewicz was my mother's older sister. All of us lived together in one small house during the first winter. Before my father, Michael, could file for a homestead, he was killed with my older sister, Catherine. Dad was only 49 years old then, and my mother, Anna, was only 38 years old when she became a widow in a strange land. Only her faith in God kept the family together. I farmed with my older brothers and mother until about 1910, and I filed a homestead in the Badlands northwest of Belfield on Franks Creek Road and ranched until 1917. I was drafted into the U.S. Army during World War I. That's right, World War I. And was stationed at United States Flying Schools, Carlstrom Field, Arcadia, Florida. After being discharged from the Army, I returned home to farm. In 1926, Joe and I started the International Harvester dealership in Belfield. I married Mildred Palanchik in 1928. They were blessed with 16 children. And that gets expanded a little bit more in the first book. So I thought I'd go back to the first book where he talks about how his family came from Russia, but before his parents came, their family, the grandfather and grandmother, Johann and Barbara Kessel, had immigrated from Germany in 1809, so they had come 7 years earlier already. He describes a little bit more about the accident that killed his father and sister. He said, when I was 7 years old, his father, then 47 years old, and 13-year-old sister Catherine were killed by a runaway team of horses on a return trip from Dickinson. They were stopping at an old friend's home about 6 miles northwest of Dickinson when the team was frightened by something, crushing him against the barn. The wagon ran over their sister. After the accident, Anna, she took the children and moved to Dickinson for a while, a couple years, and then returned and moved out on the farm. And this woman was quite a woman, as they were in those days. Those pioneer women were strong. She homesteaded and built a 2-room house of mud near the Green River. Anna was a midwife for anyone in need for miles around. She also doctored people in ways of setting bones, administering medicine. And a lot of people, when they came from the old country, knew how to gather up the herbs, and they wouldn't go to a doctor. They just took care of themselves. And sometimes it says she made herself and spent days with critically ill patients, sometimes jeopardizing her own life to save others. Amazing. Well, while they were ranching, World War I, Philip was drafted into the U.S. Army and stationed in Florida. And this is an interesting description. He was a flying mechanic. It says the J.G. White Engineering Corps, Carlstrom Field, Arcadia, Florida. While in the Army, Kessel was a flying mechanic. When an airplane could not make it back to base and had to make a forced landing, a flying mechanic would pilot a service plane to the distressed aircraft and repair it. And that's what he did. After being discharged from the Army, Phil returned to Billings County to farm. Joe and Phil rented some land and farmed together as partners. And then in 1926, they decided he was going to move to Belfield and start the International Harvester dealership, which they did. They were partners. And Phil met Mildred Palanchuk, daughter of Carol and Agnes Palanchuk, who were also early pioneers and homesteaders. Mildred's parents homesteaded north and east of Belfield in Stark County. They actually had a coal mine. And Phil and Mildred were married in 1928. They didn't move to this house on the hill right away, but they lived in Belfield. And like the history part of the video from the history portion mentioned, in 1943, the Holland Dakota Land Company liquidated. And it was in 1943 that they purchased the home, the mansion on the hill. Then, from then on, it was called the Kessel home, and they raised their 16 children there. So that's my story tonight. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a good one. Bye now.